Okay, hello. Today is May 31st, 2023, and it is the birthday of Lebbeus Woods. Was born on May 31st in 1940. Uh, Unfortunately, this is a rather short presentation about him. I wish I found the longer one, the more complex one, but uh, you know, imperfect as it is an homage to him. In 2020, when I began this series of presentations, actually I had a very elaborated presentation about him. I even wrote a long poem dedicated to him, and there were many people here on the Zoom platform. But now we just plunge into his graphic work, because Lebbeus Woods was mainly an architect who expressed ideas through his drawings. He built very little, but his drawings are very original and drawn impeccably. I knew him personally. We were friends for a good number of years, but I never asked him, or I never found out how actually he worked, how he was able to make these very elaborated drawings. And he did them before the arrival of the computer, before the arrival of the digital technologies. He had the courage to envision a world in which conflict existed, sometimes in exacerbated manners. But when I met him first, those were years when postmodernism was still rather strong, and some influences of postmodernism arrived in his work as well. This is an older drawing, imaginary cities. He loved Friedrich Nietzsche. He loved Zarathustra. He loved, sometimes the kind of monumentality that he proposed, some people probably felt uncomfortable with. But in all cases, Lebbeus Woods drew unbelievably well. And again, these were manually made drawings. They had nothing to do with, Photoshop or, the digital manipulations of today. These were visions of architecture as he saw it. It's very possible that, and I don't know if some people commented on this, but I think like in so many other cases, our work is autobiographical. And I know he lost his father immediately after the Second World War, or maybe even during the Second World War. His father, I think he worked in the military in some way. He lost his father, and I always thought that Lebbeus Woods was a kid or a child without a father, and a father without children, although he did have children. His drawings showed this drama, the drama of architecture. By the way, I suggest to you to open his blog. He had a very fine blog and is still accessible on the web. He had a very, very astute critical mind, although he thought I am an excellent critic, although I'm not a critic. I'm too subjective to be a critic. I emit so-called critical, positions, or interpretations, but this is done by almost all architects, so I'm not a critic, but he thought I am an excellent critic. I don't think I am. And so his drawings show this tumultuousness of a conflict between, on one hand, the desire for expression, and on the other, the awareness of death. I mean, like, look at this drawing. What is this? Is it a building? An usable building? it seems that the forces of Thanatos animate a lot of the structures he imagined. Or look here, you see the wall of the past, you know, a masonry brick wall, and then you see this monstrous metallic futuristic in the sense of the Italian futurism, you know, agglomerate or conglomerate or agglomeration of fragments that you know is coming upon us, ruining completely the past. Or here, he was obsessed by war. As I said, he lost his father, related to war, but he was also so concerned about the war that there was a book published, Architecture is War. War is architecture. This was his expression. Architecture is war. War is architecture. I'm not so convinced about this, but it is a conflict, yes, between man and the earth in the act of erecting a building. Some even thought, the so-called primitive people, that when you start the foundation of a building and you make a hole in the ground for the foundation, you are actually raping the earth. But I don't think too many architects or too many builders or too many engineers have a similar feeling when they build a building. Look here, war and architecture. Lebbeus suits. This was an issue of pamphlet architecture published by Princeton Architectural Press, but this was actually founded by his good friend Stephen Hall. He started to publish small, rather modest, you know, brochures, little books called Pamphlet Architecture. This number 15, published by Princeton Architectural Press, was dedicated to war and architecture by Lebbeus Suits. Well, this is the Italian futurism this was not made by Lebbeus Suits, but the spirit of a section of his work is very much related to the futurists. The Italian futurists were also obsessed by war, and they even you know, wanted to be part of the war, and some even died during the war. So the drawings of Lebbeus Suits, fantastic as they are, some people might call them science fiction, do have a psychic power that is not to be neglected. And you see in almost all of them the conflict, the dialectical you know, tension between you know, two structures that oppose each other. You see here too, on the right, we see, you know, kind of like a traditional little house. And then on the left, the eruption of a ruin, which screams its right to exist. So some people think he was an illustrator. He was an illustrator, but he was also a philosopher. He was an illustrator who illustrated his architectonic philosophy, and he had an excellent critical mind. And again, if you study his blog, you would agree that he wrote very well and he thought very well. And his drawings, yes, are fantastic. In a certain way, he is you know, a Piranesian architect, or he was a Piranesian architect. This particular drawing, which he drew so exquisitely, well, brought him luck, because Hollywood, making a film with Bruce Willis, copied this idea and this drawing and introduced it into a film in which Bruce Willis played, and without acknowledging the source of inspiration. And Lebbeus found out and sued them, and he won. And he got some money from Hollywood because of this. I met, so to speak, a British architect who responded to a call for entries that I launched, A House for Vladimir Putin, and he took this drawing of Lebbeus suits and placed Vladimir Putin on that death chair or throne, or I don't know how to call it, suspended as it is there on the wall. Because what we see here, and it's very charged psychologically, is almost, you know, the day of judgment. That sphere, we could say, is God. And the empty chair is man in front of God, being judged. Now, I don't understand what happened, because it didn't end. What happened? I think I placed something. Yes, sorry. Yeah, I guess I'm emotional, but I'll correct it now. So the presentation about his work didn't end. Here is again from his earlier work, where he you know, explored ideas for cities. He was concerned with wholeness, but then later on, probably under the influence of deconstruction or deconstructivism, he began to deconstruct his work as well. He drew incessantly. I mean, he had a huge amount of drawings. He drew continuously, and he was obsessed. It was an act of love, of course. And in a certain way, it was a self-exploration through drawing. That's why I keep saying architects, even if they don't have clients, even if they don't have commissions, they cannot be stopped to think about architecture, to feel about architecture, and to express what they think and feel through drawings, models, manual or digital or whatever. And you better do this if you are an architect and if you love architecture. War and architecture. You see here the old being, you know, defenseless vis-a-vis the forces of, you could say, vis-a-vis the forces of the new. The new is coming in explosive and, you know, dangerous ways. It's war indeed. Now, I don't know when he made this drawing. I imagine he made it before September 11th. And in fact, I would be interested actually to double check, but I think he made it before September 11, maybe with some good years before. But that's in a way what happened on September 11. So art preceded life. And this happens. I remember reading Alexander Pushkin's work, Onegin, where he describes the case of a man who provokes to a duel the French ambassador in, I don't know, St. Petersburg, because he flirted with his wife. And in the duel, he dies. He's shot. The man is shot. And exactly the same thing happened to Pushkin himself 2 years later. This is unbelievable. So in Onegin, Pushkin described what was to happen to him 2 years later. I say this because this drawing, I'm almost sure it was done before September 11 and some years before September 11. Somebody did this rendering. It's a rendering, actually. It's not, this building was not built, but based on, I don't know, sketches or drawings of Lebbeus suits. It's very possible that if he would have built a building, it would have looked like this. But he didn't build it. He only built something in China, thanks to his friend Stephen Hall, in a housing complex, and we are going to see a few images. This image I know very well because he sent me a DVD or a CD with for an exhibition I organized in Chicago called Architecture and Intoxication, or something like this. And he sent me this earthquake architecture. I don't know how he did this. It almost looks like a model of some sort. Other drawings by Lebbeus. He was very moved by the war in former Yugoslavia, and he traveled there. And, you know, here are images that he produced. I mean, that monstrous architecture, in a way, these drawings actually show a psychological architecture or a psychic architecture. They are infused with the psychic material. Um, he was also obsessed, like many other, well, maybe not many, but some architects and some important architects, by non-gravity or anti-gravity. But these heavy things are drawn as if they are, you know, weightless, when in fact they are immensely heavy. But look at how exquisite the drawing is. I did write once something a little bit critical of him, where I said I like the way his drawings are done, but I don't like what they represent. Because this is a world in disarray. How could this heavy thing fly? It's impossible, but he makes it fly. And the drawing, I mean, just look at the sky, how he drew the sky, and again. This is manual drawing. This was done with pencil on paper, not with any photoshopping or anything. This was done before 1990, before 1985, when, let's say, the first computer came into being. I mean, personal computer. Conflict. He had a great impact on architecture, and as I said, many young architects have great reverence for him. Now you could say maybe they are escapists. They try to escape the banality of mediocre life and the mediocre practice of architecture, and then they find refuge in the exceptionalism and the, you know, the science fiction aspect of his work. Maybe that is too, because we all want a horizon of hope. We all want to travel somewhere which is less conditioned by, you know, the constraints that usually life has. Look at these drawings, ruined, but the ruin is more interesting than the so-called healthy parts of the building which are not ruined. He also has lots of notations. I would call it asemic writing. There is no meaning attached to the writing, but they mimic being writing. Again, one could ask, what made this man make such drawings? What was in his head? What was in his... This was a man who read a lot, who was very open towards ideas, who loved ideas. So there is a lot of thought here. It's not just, you know, a happy-go-lucky illustration of some virtuosity. No. He built this with his students, I guess. Or now, how he built it, you know, because how could you make a rigorous, you know, project for something like this? It's a sculpture, it's an installation, it's not really a building. But I would say that it makes you think, you know, and it does have to do with our time, and it was built in our time. You know, this fragmentation, this neurotical fragmentation, which is our time, is our present. Why is it that never in the past there was an architectural movement or current called deconstruction? There must have been a reason, no? That there was such an event at the end of the 20th century. Back to, we saw this drawing before. Now look again, just to make this drawing out of your head, because this drawing, what you see here, it was never built, was never photographed. This came from the head of the architect. In a way, it's an idealized or romanticized world, and on the other hand, is a dystopian world, like here. I mean, look at this corner of imagined corner of a street, or where the intersection of two streets happen. This is even more dramatic than the dancers or the dancing towers of Frank Gehry in Prague, because this is not dancing. There is a grimace here. There is the suffering of this corner is incredible. It is a tortured building. Maybe you could say these are images of his soul. Although this man laughed as very few people laugh. And as I said, he loved to eat well, to drink well. He loved wine. I don't think one day passed without him drinking. Here he is, and he is, after he won the, legal procedure, so to speak, with Hollywood, and this enabled him to, acquire this penthouse. Now, what is in a way strange, and I'm inclined to notice it, is how different his environment is from his drawings. Because as you can see here, the books are, ordered based on size on the shelves nicely. And, there is no sign here of dystopia or, fragmentation or ruin or death. Lebbeus Woods. And I am nostalgic, of course. He was not just an exquisite draftsperson, he was also a thinker, and perhaps first and foremost, he was a thinker who expressed himself through drawing. He smoked. Not too many architects smoked and smoke, but he did. And this is the work in China that he did. I mean, the towers were built by his friend, Stephen Hall, but Stephen Hall invited Lebbeus to build this thing. And I read, or I've heard him say that, he struggled to convince the client, the Chinese developer, to accept this intervention, which is quite big, because you see how many floors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 floors. I mean, this is 20 meters by 20 meters. It's a large piece of distortion that Lebbeus incorporated dramatically into the building by his friend. And in the end, apparently, the Chinese client accepted this extravaganza, because Stephen Hall said, we have to lit up the courtyard, the space between these towers, and this is a way of doing it. Now, of course, it could have been done in a much less dramatic way. Here it is. I mean, here there are a few more images of this thing, which again is large in scale. You can find on YouTube probably several videos, but in one of them you can see Stephen Hall climbing on the stair here and being very ecstatic and happy, being a lover and maker of architecture, welcoming the disruptions of Lebbeus in the flesh of his own buildings. I think the loyalty of Stephen Hall towards or for Lebbeus is very moving. They were indeed very good friends. And this is that chair that I showed before, and I commented on it, is man against God, or a chair against, not against, I shouldn't say against, facing in an almost obedient way the judgment, the last judgment. And the judgment, of course, comes from the sphere, from God. Thank you, and let's wish Lebbeus happy birthday. And if you want, let's talk a little bit about him now.